Lesson 22, Day 2, Comparing and Ordering Rational Numbers. Good news, I'm not requiring photos of work. Alright, so before we start this lesson, you need to know some common fraction decimal equivalents. And you can refer back to these slides and this video whenever you like. But we're going to talk about tenths first. So if you see in the left column here, we start with 1/10 as a fraction is the same as 1/10 as a decimal. And that makes sense, right? 1/10, 1/10. They sound the same. So just remember that first decimal place is the tenths place. So 1/10 is the same as 0.1. 2/10 then would be the same as 0.2, but also remember that we're going to simplify 2/10. We can divide the numerator and the denominator by 2, and that would give us 1/5. Okay, so 2/10 is equivalent to 1/5, and both of those fractions are equivalent to 0.2. And then 3/10 is equivalent to 3/10. 4/10, again, dividing these both by 2 would give you 2/5, and both of those fractions are equivalent to 4/10. 5/10, dividing both of these by 5 would give me 1/2, and both of those are equivalent to 5/10. 6/10, dividing both of those by 2 would give you 3/5, and both of those are equivalent to 0.6 or 6/10. 7/10 is 7/10. 8/10, dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2 gives me 4/5. Both of those are equivalent to 8/10, and then 9/10 is 9/10. Please study those. Make sure you know those. Become familiar. Then there's the fourths that will come up very often. And when you think of fourths, think of money, think of quarters. Okay, so 25 cents in money is the same as 1/4 or 1/4. Okay, 50 cents is the same as 0.5, which is equivalent to 2/4 or half a dollar. And then 75 cents is the same as 3/4. Using those fraction decimal equivalents, keeping those in mind, let's work on page 75, number 22. Use less than, greater than, or equal to compare. So remember that first symbol, that's the less than sign. The next one is the greater than sign. Okay, so this one is kind of facing the same direction as the L for less than. So pause the video and try these. Try to compare these using what we just saw on the previous slides about fraction decimal equivalents. Pause the video, try it. Okay, now that you've tried it, let's go over the answers. So 1/10 we talked about on the one of the previous slides, that is the same as 0.1. And we are comparing that to 0.09. So this is 1/10 compared to 9/100. Well, there's an easy way for me to write 0.1 so that it looks more like 0.09. We can annex a 0 here. And so now we're comparing 10/100 and 9/100. And now it's much easier to see that 10/100 is more than 9/100. So you should have had the greater than sign here. Now for letter B, 1 and 44/100 compared to -1 and 1/4. Again, it's kind of hard to compare when they're written in different forms, so let's write them both as decimals. We learned that -1 and 1/4 is the same as -1 and 25/100 because we just learned on the previous slide that 1/4 is the same as 1/4 or 0.25. So -1 and 1/4 would be -1 and 25/100. So now we're comparing -1 and 25/100 to -1 and 44/100. Now we know that 44/100 would be more than 25/100. However, these are both negative numbers, so it actually kind of works in reverse. So the -1 and 44/100 is actually smaller than -1 and 25/100 because it's further to the left from 0. It's further away on the left. So left is less. So you should have had greater than for A and less than for B. If you got it right, celebrate! Good job. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is ordering rational numbers. So this is page 75, number 23. Letter B. They want you to put these 4 rational numbers in order from least to greatest. You've got 3 of them that are negative. 1 of them is positive. So since we know that all negatives are smaller than all positives, then at least you know which one is the biggest one. But then you got to do some work using those fraction decimal equivalents we saw on the previous slides to help you change the fractions two decimals, so everything looks the same, everything looks like a decimal, and then it'll be easier to compare. So pause the video, try that. Change the fractions to decimals, and then compare them and order them least to greatest. Okay, so you should have realized that negative 4/5 is the same as negative 8/10, right? Because 5 times 2 is 10, so 4 times 2 is 8, so that's going to be 8 over 10, which is the same as negative 0.8. And hopefully you know that negative 1/2 is the same as negative 5/10, and then we have 25 hundredths, and we have the negative 2/10. Okay, so now everything is in decimal form, so it's a lot easier to compare. This one is the only one, 25 hundredths is the only one that's positive, so we know that's going to be the greatest one, so that's going to go all the way to the right. 0.25 will be on the right side. So we're finished with that one. I don't need to look at that one anymore. So now looking at these other three, I have negative 8/10, negative 5/10, negative 2/10. They're all negative. So that means that even though the number may look larger, it's actually the smaller one because it's further to the left from 0. So out of those three, although negative 8/10 looks like it's the biggest one, it's actually the smallest one. So negative 8/10 would be first, and then it would be negative 5/10, and then it would be negative 2/10. However, those weren't the actual numbers from the problem, so now let's rewrite it using the numbers from the problem. So negative 8/10, we got that from the negative 4/5. Negative 5/10, we got that from negative 1/2. Negative 2/10 was indeed negative 2/10, and 25 hundredths was as 25 hundredths. So this is the correct answer for number 23, letter B. Okay, now try letter F. So page 75, number 23, letter F. Pause the video. Try it on your own. Change those fractions to decimals so everything looks like a decimal, and then put them in order, least to greatest. And remember, all negatives are smaller than all positives. All right, now let's see how you did. Thank you for pausing the video and doing this on your own. So first thing, change them all to decimals. So negative 4/5. If I multiply both of these by 2, that'll change the denominator here to 10, the numerator to 8, so I know that's negative 0.8. Negative 5/4, so that's an improper fraction. So if I divide 5 by 4, I know that 4 goes in a 5 one time, so my whole number is 1, with 1 left over. So my numerator is 1. I keep the same denominator, and I have to make sure I remember that negative sign. So negative 5/4 is the same as negative 1 1/4, but again, that's still written in a mixed number. It's not quite as a decimal yet. We learned that 1/4 is the same as 25 hundredths, so we're going to write that as negative 1.25. Let's talk about the negative 3/2. As a mixed number, we divide. 3 divided by 2. And 2 goes into 3 one time with 1 left over. And we keep the same denominator. Make sure we remember that negative sign. So what would that be as a decimal? Well, we keep the negative 1, the whole number stays. And we learned that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So negative 1.5 is the same as negative 1.5. And then the last number we had was positive 1.5. So let's put these in order from least to greatest. Again, we only have one positive number, so I know that's the one that's going to go all the way to the right. Now looking at these other numbers, the one that appears the largest is actually the smallest because it is going to be the furthest to the left, the furthest away from 0. If it helps, you can annex a 0 here so that they all are written in hundredths. I know this one has a 0 in the whole number spot, and both of these have a 1 in the whole number spot. So I know that the ones that have the negative 1 as a whole number are going to be further to the left. So that means the next one I should put that's right next to the 1.5 should be the negative 0.8. And then it's a battle between these two to see which one of these two is the absolute smallest. So again, we can annex a 0 here to make it a little bit easier. And so you might now see negative 1 and 5/10 or negative 1 and 50 hundredths. That's the one that's going to be furthest to the left. And then it will be negative 1.25 and then negative 0.8 and 1.5. And again, we got to go back to how the numbers were originally written. And negative 1.5, that came from the negative 3 halves. The negative 1.25, that came from the negative 5 fourths. Negative 0.8, that came from the negative 4 fifths. And then the last one was just 1 and 5/10. So this is the answer for letter F. So your assignment is on enVisions. You're going to log into enVisions. You're going to complete 2-2 Math Excel for School Practice and Problem Solving Day 2. Again, no photos of work are required, and they are just like the problems that I did here. So you can always come back and refer to the video or just look back at the PowerPoint. You're going to do great. I believe in you. And remember, you can always use the similar question button or the question help button. And even after you do the whole assignment, you can even click the try again button, try the whole thing over again for a brand new grade. Good luck, and I'll see you later.